Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Worthel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. And our mantra is educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, as you know, if you listen to my show, I have phenomenal guests on every time. I do believe my guests are phenomenal, and I learn from each and every one of them. And today I have with me another exceptional guest. How timely this book is. My guest today is Freddie Kelvin, Kelvin, who is author and writer of the book Urban Nomad, a memoir, which on the cover you will see it has won a literary Titan Book Award. Dr. Freddie Kelvin. Freddie Kelvin is a retired radiologist. He's a photographer, an artist, and he does art, worldwide traveler, and very interesting person. And I can't wait to speak to Freddie Kelvin. So welcome, Freddie Kelvin, to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm truly delighted, and I feel very honored to be a guest on your show. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome. It is my honor and really to interview you. Your book sounds so interesting, and it is, I know when you wrote your book, you didn't think what the environment, the climate would be like when you were, to go out to do interviews. But I will say this, with the climate of anti-Semitism being as it is, this book is very timely, and I think everyone should read this book. And I'm going to ask you, Freddie, as I ask all the authors and writers, is what motivated you to write your a memoir based about your parents?
Yes, that's a good question. Initially, Betsy, I wrote this memoir for my children and my grandchildren. My parents narrowly escaped from Nazi Austria in 1938. And I wanted them to understand my background because I really didn't talk about it that much. For example, in Austria, the Nazis led to my grandfather committing suicide when they took over his life's work, which was a shoe factory. And the Nazis were also responsible for the extermination of a branch of my father's family in Yugoslavia. And I don't think my children, and certainly not my grandchildren, have enough knowledge about where I came from. And it's partly because my life was complicated because I completely abandoned my Jewish heritage. And I don't think I realized the implications of this until I'd written more of my biography than just about my parents. So the reason sort of changed, and it became trying to understand who I was after I'd abandoned my Jewish background.
I think it's important, Freddie, for people to tell their children, their grandchildren, their history, and the history of their relatives. So that's a wonderful project that you did. That was I feel that you should be honored for that.
Yes. Well, it's a plus and a minus. By rejecting my Jewish background, I really lost my identity, and it left me rootless and disconnected. And I want readers to understand that you really can never completely walk away from your roots. I mean, they are part of who you are, and they will always be there. And I didn't grasp this at the time that I walked away. And then I'd say there is more to it than that. During my career, and even more after retirement, I traveled a lot, and often abroad. And this opened my eyes to worlds that were far different than that of my Jewish provincial upbringing. And it taught me a lot, which we can discuss as we go further into this.
Sure. Well, I'm sure in different parts of the country, all over the world, that, you know, depending on, well, I should say it's up to the individual, but the culture that you are in, I think how a Jewish person is treated. I grew up in New Jersey, and I had anti-Semitism, so it is worldwide. And you're right, you can't escape your roots. I just think if you're Jewish, you know it. You know, I mean, it's just something that is in you. And you'll always know it, yes. Yes. You know,
so growing up in England after the Second World War, I was told by my father and godfather to change my foreign-sounding name, both because the British were xenophobic as well as also anti-Semitic. And they told me to change my foreign-sounding name to avoid discrimination in my future career. However, there's an amusing side note to that, which didn't amuse me at the time. Unwittingly, I chose to change my name to a Scottish one, which is Kelvin. And there's a story here. We had a Scottish professor of anatomy, Professor E.W. Walls, who was very much respected. And one day, in front of the entire class, he looked directly at me and he said, Mr. Kelvin, tell me, whereabouts in Scotland do you come from? Now, there wasn't any answer to this since I changed my name. And what I didn't know was that Professor E.W. Walls was trained and studied throughout most of his career in Glasgow. And in Glasgow, there's a river, the River Kelvin. And Lord Kelvin, the physicist and mathematician, chose the title of Lord Kelvin because of the river that was running through his native Glasgow. If I'd known all this, Betsy, I would never have changed my name to a Scottish name because it was not appropriate. I was not, of course, Scottish. That's
an interesting story because I don't know how to pronounce your original name. Is it Cahoot?
Cohut. I think it's the people in the north of England didn't know either, and they sometimes, for example, would call me Cowhut, which I didn't appreciate.
I'm terrible with names. But when I looked at it, you know, I saw the original, and I was wondering how you pronounce that. Because when I looked at your original name, K-O-H-U-T, to me, without knowing your like right away your background, to me it sounded German.
It's, I believe it's Czechoslovakian. I think it's Czech for a cockerel. At least that's what I was told. Mm-hmm. But it certainly was not helpful in post-war England. And I was told unequivocally to change my name to avoid, like I said, anti-Semitism and British xenophobia.
There's a lot of people who, you know, changed their name, and your parents escaped Austria, and there was children that were hidden during the Holocaust, and they didn't know they were Jewish because they were told, "Forget that you're Jewish.
Don't mention it." Yes, yeah.
Yes, and so this was after World War II, and your dad is telling you to, don't say you're Jewish to protect yourself against what he knew you were saying.
I grew up essentially in a completely Jewish society. I had no non-Jewish friends at all. It was very much like living in a cocoon and cut off from the rest of, the community in Leeds in the north of England. And so it was in a way unhealthy to be segregated or self-segregating like that.
Reminds me of a shtetl, like they had in Europe.
Yes, a British shtetl in a way.
Yes, shtetl, yes.
A sort of middle class or upper middle class shtetl, but nevertheless a shtetl. And part of my rebellion was because of the way my Jewish father's friends treated him. About 2 or 3 years after my mother died, and I was 14 at the time, my father started dating, and my father was in his late 50s. He started dating a younger lady who was about 23. Now that's 32, 33 years age difference. Well, that was bad enough for my father's friends in Leeds where I grew up. But to make it worse, she was highly attractive. She was very charming and committed the unforgivable sin of not being Jewish.
Oh,
and my father's friends had selected a Jewish lady of about his age, which he did not fall in line with. And half my father's friends summarily dropped him when he obviously was seriously involved and became in love with this much younger, attractive Gentile. And this really turned me strongly against that aspect of Jewish society, which doesn't want to have anything to do with those who are not of the same religion. At least that's how it struck me as a teenager. And it influenced me because both my wives have not been Jewish, and it is as if when you walk away and you deny your identity, you're taking on a completely different identity, and that creates internal conflicts.
That is very interesting, Freddie, because back in that time that your dad was dating this much younger woman who happened to be a Gentile, shiksa, as it's referred to in Yiddish, that was scandalous. That was hugely scandalous at that time. Back in the 70s here in the States, when a cousin, the first one to marry outside of Jewish religion, it was the scandal in the family.
Yes, I was best man for two very good friends, and both times the night before their wedding, the mothers warned me not to date non-Jewish girls. And since I was sort of dating quite seriously my first wife, who was not Jewish, I, of course, ignored this stern advice.
Yes, we were told also, to marry in your own kind. Were you, you grew up in a Jewish area. I didn't. But were
yes,
you...
it was essentially completely, not completely Jewish, but heavily Jewish. And we didn't mix with non-Jewish people socially. That's just the way. A lot of my parents' friends were refugees from Central Europe, and they had their own self-contained Jewish European continental identity, and they were very comfortable sort of taking refuge in that.
Yes. They were, I could only imagine, afraid to venture out into the community because they didn't know how they would be treated after surviving what they did.
I think that's right. And there were stories that Jewish people I knew, for example, in medicine, did not get a job that they were clearly the best candidate for because they were Jewish and because they had a foreign-sounding name. And in Britain, the discrimination was very cleverly kept under the surface. It wasn't very overt.
Kind of hidden.
Yes. But when these friends of mine didn't get the job and they were, the best qualified candidate, they knew what the reason was.
Yes, and we had that in the States also. There was companies, I won't mention them, but that were well known for being anti-Semitic and not hiring Jews. And actually, Freddie, I just learned this year that down in south part of the United States, that Jews were not allowed to live in certain areas. They would say no Jews allowed.
That. Yeah.
I didn't know that either. I found that out. And being a show that I was part of, and we talked about anti-Semitism, and I had no idea. My mom, she said, "Oh yeah, your dad told me that when he was in the Navy. They would have signs: no dogs, no Jews allowed." So we were equal with the dogs, I guess.
Oh yes, now you mention it. Yes, I remember hearing about that or seeing it broadcast on television in a documentary. Yes.
So that was like eye-opening to me because I did not know that. I, do know that when my mom is from New York, my dad's from New Jersey, so when they got married and they moved to New Jersey, they had difficulty finding a place to live because of being Jewish. A lot of the areas they were not allowed. And that was in the late 50s.
Yes,
yeah, I would say
you couldn't join country clubs, and there were certain social clubs that would make sure you didn't become a member of their community. Yeah, it's pretty well known, unfortunately. But there is a positive side, although I hate to say it, to walking away, because you then open your eyes to other worlds that are different to the one you grew up in, and
true.
And I, in a way, gradually learned how important it was to respect other cultures, other religions. Someone once said, and I just came across this the other day, we travel not to escape life, but so that life does not escape us. And in a way, life did not escape me, and I recognized that it had far more breadth than my Jewish upbringing had led me to believe. And so it was sort of like opening multiple doors, and the more I traveled, the more these doors informed me and made me realize how important it is to respect others.
Yes. You taught at Duke University. How was your experience in living down south?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, first of all, the discrimination in North Carolina was directed, of course, predominantly to blacks. And it was very, very clear. This was not hidden in the slightest. In fact, I remember driving with my wife to the North Carolina coast, which eastern North Carolina is very rural and in a way very backward. And we drove through a town of maybe 20,000 called Smithfield. And as we entered the town, there was a tall pole by the roadside, and it didn't say Rotary Club. It said, "Welcome to KKK country."
Oh, my goodness.
And that was between 1975 and 1985. Now, it did come down before we left North Carolina in 1985, but it was up there for a good few years, and it was horrifying to see. There wasn't much discrimination against Jews in North Carolina that I experienced because Duke was part of the research triangle. It was a university area, and there were actually quite a lot of Jewish people who were either faculty or students at Duke, UNC, or North Carolina State. So there really wasn't much in the way of anti-Semitism in North Carolina. There is some here in the Midwest, in Indianapolis, where I now live. It's not very flagrant, but it's there.
I lived down south also for 3 years in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I did see prejudice against black people, against Jews, Yankees also, and I just find that it just boggles my mind sometimes, Freddie, that and people might get offended when I say this, but that's okay because I just have to say what I have to say. People who claim to be Christians, in my opinion, should not be anti-Semitic. Matter of fact, they should really love the Jews and support the Jews. Because
I think you're right. I think the reason that they are quotes, unquotes, sometimes anti-Semitic is, as one person who's, I'd say, quite a good friend and a devout Christian, she said to me after reading my memoir, well, first of all, she said, you had it in for the Christians. Well, I actually only mentioned what might be called the misdeeds of the Christians 3 times in the book, which I didn't feel was a lot in 233 pages. But then she couldn't help adding, and you refused to follow Christ. And I think that's perhaps the main reason that evangelical Christians, messianic Christians, are disposed unkindly to the Jews because they consider Christianity to be the superior religion. And if we want to be saved, well, we need to become Christian and relinquish our Judaism. Well, to me, religion is about identity. And with that identity, you exclude those who are not of your religion. For every we, there is often a them. And these people are not like us. And that's, I think, how Jews have been frequently viewed by Christianity and sometimes other religions. And if we're not like the religion that's so concerned about our salvation and our welfare, then we may be coerced to becoming one of them. So we are like them. And if the coercion doesn't work, we may find that violence is shown to us. And as we know throughout history, even slaughter. And can I tell you an anecdote that's kind of very important, if we have time?
Sure, go ahead.
So there's no question that Martin Luther was one of the great religious figures of history. He changed the course of Christianity. He started the Reformation and the Protestant movement, and he deserves enormous credit for broadening the width of Christianity, if you will. However, he wanted Roman Catholics to convert, and he also wanted Jews to convert. And he got very frustrated with Jews for failing to convert. So frustrated that in the latter years of his life, he issued a 7-point edict, which was entitled The Jews and Their Lives. Sorry, The Jews and Their Lies. Their Lies. And the first part of the 7-point edict was, burn their synagogues. And the second point of his 7-point edict was, burn their homes. And I can tell you without reciting the other 5 that they weren't any better. Now,
right.
I think many Christians don't know about this, and it may be because they're reluctant to talk about it. It doesn't shine a bright light on Martin Luther, which, of course, is what they would like. So if we fast forward now, and this is the point of the story, in the 1930s, there was a magazine called Der Stürmer that was edited by Julius Streicher, and it was a vitriolically anti-Semitic newspaper that the Nazis would pin on the streets all over the place to make sure that German citizens would read it and take notice of what Der Stürmer was saying, and it was very, very heavily anti-Semitic, so anti-Semitic that Julius Streicher, the editor, was considered a war criminal and stood trial at Nuremberg. But you will not guess what his defense was. His defense was, we were only carrying out Martin Luther's prescriptions. If Martin Luther was alive now, he would be sitting right next to me here in the dock. No wonder people didn't want to know or be educated about the flip side of the coin of this great man.
Right. I did hear that he burned Jews at the stake.
I don't know if he actually burned them, but that was his publicly proclaimed prescription. Mm-hmm. And he was obviously encouraging people to do that. But whether they did or not, I actually don't know about. But he was very influential, and what he said carried a lot of weight, and it obviously carried forward to the misguided Nazis.
Yes, that I could definitely see the correlation there. What motivated you, Freddie, to get back to your Jewish roots?
Well, I think I mentioned that I became a very passionate photographer.
Right.
And through photography and shooting the performing arts, I became involved with the Jewish Federation, and I eventually went on 5 or 6 trips to Israel, and the camera was what enabled me to be part of an artistic exchange between Israeli artists and artists in the Midwest. And so I came close to meeting many Israelis during these 5 or 6 visits, and I came to realize what a wonderful people the Israeli Jews were. Now, they're not all saints, and we're not going to go into any detail of politics.
Right.
But my pride in the Jewish people, Jewish nation, was largely restored. And even though I'm a secular Jew, I strongly believe now, paradoxically, in the Jewish identity. You know, we are part of a Jewish nation, and I'm now proud of it. But it took me all these travels to finally, after 40 or 50 years, to come to that realization of being proud.
Well, I think that's beautiful, Freddie. I really do. They say that going to Israel is like life-changing to some people.
I think it is for many people, and the country is clearly not perfect, and I personally have some strong misgivings about the current Israeli government. We'll leave it at that. But on balance, Israel has been a huge plus for intellectual, scientific advancement. It has the second largest number of patents in the world after the United States. It's 0.2% of the world's population, but it's responsible for, I believe, 20% of Nobel Prize winners.
Wow.
Go figure. The influence that Jewish scientists, intellectuals, and others have had on advancement of knowledge. Why that is the case, I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's to do with being curious. And if you're on the outside, as Jews were for so many centuries, they perhaps were more curious than being comfortably installed on the inside. And I remember Shimon Peres once saying, and I heard him say this to a large group, said, what is the greatest contribution of the Jews to civilization? And people gave some sort of answers, and he said, no, it's not this, it's not that. He said, it's curiosity. He said, we Jews are never satisfied. And I think it stems from adversity. You can't be satisfied in adverse circumstances. You have to push and push more to get anywhere. Whereas if
right.
you are, a person who's inherited a vast fortune through your, whatever, and you don't have to do much to earn a living because you're a trust fund baby, well, you're not going to be very curious, and quite a lot of trust fund babies, I think, get involved in drugs and alcohol, and they don't need to work a day because it's all given to them on a plate. So I think adversity does perhaps push Jews to do things that others prone to explore.
That's interesting. I started watching this rabbi on YouTube, also on Instagram, and she was talking about something similar to what you're talking about, but why are Jews successful, and what is the purpose of a Jew? And he said something to the fact of, we're here to bring light to the world, that to show our humanity to one another. And so that would make sense to me about curiosity and going with, humanity and being able to find a better way to keep ourselves healthy, other people healthy, by inventing, discovering medical discoveries, like penicillin. And it was just to hear this rabbi talk, so inspired. And I think that sometimes anti-Semitism comes from jealousy when they do see people being very successful.
I think it's probably one of the factors. However, Betsy, I do think that Jews have to be careful. For us to claim any kind of superiority is nonsense. And if we look at the world's great religions, there's no question that Christianity has been enormously beneficial for many people and has given them spiritual guidance. And the same is also true for Islam. and Hinduism and Buddhism, although it's not strictly a religion. And I really think we have to be very, very respectful of the other major and even minor religions of the world. And very luckily, I've fallen into a situation where I'm going to be writing a blog for an interfaith organization here in Indianapolis. And each month, I'm tasked with exploring, I hope accurately and objectively, each of the world's great religions. And it's a challenge that I'm really enthused by, because I truly believe in mutual respect of each other's faiths and religions. And unless we have harmony between these different faith or religious elements in the world, I don't see any hope for mankind.
Yes, we do have to respect each other. I was shocked. I interviewed a rabbi, not this summer, it's the summer before 2022, and this rabbi was into Buddha. And
there are quite a few Jew Buddhas. Yes, there are quite a few of them.
I was really shocked.
And why not?
Very interesting.
Why not mix one religion with another if you think it helps you become a broader and better person?
Right. And you can bring different religions together. I do. And my son, we celebrated both holidays, Hanukkah and Christmas, and he knows he's Jewish. And you can honor both religions.
Yes. And I think it's important that we recognize that principle across the board, not just between Jews and Christians. And I think because I traveled so widely, Thailand, India, Turkey, Vietnam, I think this opened my eyes to being respectful towards these other cultures, even if I didn't fully understand everything that they believed in. I was filled with admiration for them.
Right. I understand what you're saying. We can admire and respect each other's different beliefs.
And we don't have to agree. It's not necessary
to agree. Right.
But it is necessary for us to show respect and understand.
Exactly. I agree 100%. As we wrap up, Freddie, what would you like the reader to take away from your book?
Yes. I think what I'd like the reader to take away is this. So my life has been a search for where do I belong, and it's been a complicated search with different twists and turns, hence the title Urban Nomad. But I think many people who've read my book, and far more than I ever expected, they've said, well, it made me think about my own life and decisions that I made, and it's made me reflect on maybe how I could or should have proceeded, and it's helped me understand better what I'm searching for. Now, if somebody's got a closed mind, it's not going to be a huge motivator, but for people with an open mind, they have said to me, and they've written, that it really, really made me rethink who I am.
That is very awesome, because a lot of people wonder that.
They're afraid to. It's challenging.
Right.
It's not easy. The easy way out is just to accept everything that you're taught, but what you're taught is not necessarily true or accurate. And if we think more about what is beyond our upbringing, then I think we can lead a more interesting and vital life.
Yes, I agree. That is beautiful, Freddie. I so enjoyed talking to you, because I talked to you for hours. Where can people purchase your book, Urban Nomad, a Memoir?
They can purchase it from Amazon, either as a paperback or as an ebook for Kindle. They can also purchase it from bookstores such as Barnes & Noble. The bookstore may not have the book within its physical precincts, but you can order Urban Nomad from any bookstore and they will obtain it, and you can get it from, let's say, Barnes & Noble as an example, again, either as a paperback or as an ebook. So it's now very widely available across the board, not just from Amazon.
And how would readers get in touch with you, to connect with you?
Well, I'm happy to give my email. Should I do that?
Only if you're comfortable. Or do you have a website?
I have a website which is called Engaging Author. That's one word, engagingauthor.com.
Okay. I don't want you getting spammed, emails. That's why.
They can also contact me through Facebook under Freddie, F-R-E-D-D-I-E, Kelvin. Or I have a second Facebook account, which is Freddie Kelvin, author.
Okay.
And I have more followers on Freddie Kelvin, it's been going for years, than I have on Freddie Kelvin, author. But I can be messaged through either of those Facebook accounts.
Great. Well, I wish you much mazel.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you so much for letting me engage with you on your show.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Folks, get the book. This is a book that is timeless, actually. It's a book for any generation, I would say, probably middle school, right? Middle school and on, Freddie?
Yes.
It's a must-read book, and I think people need to read it. We cannot forget our history. We just can't. And whether it's even America has dark periods, folks. No country is perfect at all. But we need to never forget what happened in the Holocaust and make sure it never happens again. And I just want to thank you, Freddie Kelvin, for coming on, writing your book, and for sharing your story. And, folks, all the information about Freddie Kelvin will be in the blog that Jeanne White, who's the station manager, writes. And I highly recommend you going on the website, engagingauthor.com, and learning about Freddie Kelvin and all the wonderful work that Freddie does and about his history, because we didn't have time to get to it all, and you would be fascinated. I went on the website, and I really liked what I read and what I learned about you, Freddie. And I just want to thank all the listeners for listening. Please share this show, because I want to help people, and I want people to know that this show is available. And I want to thank, Lillian Cauldwell, who's CEO at Passionate World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And I also want to tell you all, you can follow me on my Facebook page, Betsy, B-E-T-S-Y-E, Wurzel, W-U-R-Z-E-L. And if you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, please do so. It is for free on iHeart, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, to name just a few. And, folks, as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, to please be kind and shine your light bright, because we sure need it now more than ever. Let's be kind to each other. Let's bring back our humanity for each other and love up on one another. Because if you cut each other up, we will bleed red blood, folks. That's it. We need to learn to get along with each other with our differences. And that's how I feel. So that's my soapbox. And I want to wish everyone, this may not be published and posted until January, but if it's before January this gets posted, I hope everyone has a happy, healthy New Year and enjoy your holiday, whatever it is that you celebrate. And I want to thank you again for listening. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Till we chat again, be safe, everyone. Bye-bye now.